Welcome to the Manders Mindset Podcast. Here you'll find both monologue and interviews of entrepreneurs, coaches, healers, and a variety of other people, where your host Amanda Russo will discuss her own mindset and perspective and her guest mindset and perspective on the world around us. Manders and her guests will help explain to you how shifting your mindset will shift your life.
Hey guys, Manders here. And before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to mention the last few episodes, episodes 91 through 94, where we really dug into the theme of forgiveness. I got to sit down with 3 incredible women, including Jill in the last episode, and each one brought their own unique perspective on what forgiveness really means. We talked about everything from forgiving others to forgiving ourselves and how that process can open up space for growth, healing, and transformation. So if you missed those, I highly recommend going back and checking them out. They really set the stage perfectly for today's conversation with Shannon. And without further ado, let's get into episode 95. I think you're going to find this one ties everything together in a perfect way and allows us to forgive ourselves. Now, let's get into the episode. Welcome to Manders Mindset, where we explore the power of shifting your mindset to shift your life. I'm your host, Amanda Russo, and I am here today with an awesome guest. I am here today with Shannon Selge, and she is a functional nutritionist and a certified women's health coach and personal trainer. She's been in the health industry for over a decade. She has worked with thousands of women to speed up their metabolisms, balance their hormones, and work on their gut health. She competed in a bodybuilding competition, and we are going to delve into that and everything that happened leading up to that and post that for her. And I am here with Shannon today. Thank you so much for joining me.
I'm happy to be here.
So, can you tell us who Shannon is at the core? It's a great bio, but who would you say Shannon is at the core?
Gosh, that's a great question. You know, everybody always asks for like your bio and what you've done, but it's like, who are you? You know what I mean? I'm a mom. I got a 1-year-old, and I'm like an absolute just lover for women's health and wellness. And yes, I own a company, a functional wellness company, but like at my core, I think I'm just like a leader, a helper, just like a giver and an entrepreneur.
Can you take us down memory lane a little bit and tell us about your foundation, upbringing, childhood, family dynamic, however deep you want to go with that?
So actually, I don't think you know this. This is interesting. I'm a triplet, right?
I didn't know that.
So I'm a triplet, and growing up with 3 girls, it's a lot of estrogen. But I grew up in Los Angeles, and I grew up with an amazing family, really. But, you know, definitely an interesting dynamic with 2 other people you're essentially like, I hate to say competing with, but it was like kind of always felt like that a little bit growing up. And I grew up pretty young age, always being like this very high achieving type A kind of woman, which we'll talk about autoimmune disease later, is always very tightly linked. I was always like top of my class, student council, and then became a professional dancer at 13. And it was always kind of driving to be the best I could be. And that's, I don't know how deep you want me to go, but that's a little bit of my like.
Okay. Did you have any other siblings, or was it just you and the sisters?
It was just us, and everyone's like, oh yeah, I would definitely want to stop there. But my mom wanted she wanted another one. I remember her asking us when we were, I can't remember, like 6 or 8 years old. And she was like, oh, do you want like another brother or sister? And we all started bawling. Bawling. I remember it so crystal clear, because I was like, why would you want to take attention from us? Are we not enough for you? Like, yeah, it was. So,
oh my gosh.
No.
Okay. And your sister didn't want that either.
No, I don't remember how dramatic they were. I just remember being very dramatic about it. I think they were upset too, but I don't remember if all of us were crying. It was just me. I just remember like feeling very like hurt by it, even though obviously like it wasn't, a me thing. So yeah, just us. And it's, we're really close now. It's been really fun. Actually, my triplet sister gave birth to her kid 6 months behind me, which has been a lot of fun. And my other sister is living her best life. It's kidless. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Nice. Okay. So you became a professional dancer at 13.
Yeah. I had a great career. It ties into my autoimmune disease, which is really interesting. But I always remembered being like in a lot of like pain, like joint pain, and being in and out of physical therapy, chiropractic for so long. And everyone's like, you're just young. And I mean, I was dancing 30 hours a week, I think. I was just like crazy at such a young age. And now I realize like a lot of that too was just like some underlying stress and autoimmune stuff that had been boiling under the surface. But I just pushed through it like any athlete does. Just kind of rub some dirt in it and carry on. I mean, I literally danced full time through a tear in my back, if that gives you an idea of like, that was before college. And yeah, so I did it for a short period of time and then I was pulled out of it because my parents had wanted me to like be a kid, which I understand. Then I went to college and wasn't going to do stuff with dance. Ended up getting a dance scholarship. I double majored in exercise science and dance. And then after college, actually joined a professional touring company for 1 year. And my autoimmune stuff started getting really bad at that point. And so I was going to go to med school. And then decided med school, I wanted to be more on like the reactive instead of the proactive, not the reactive side of medicine. So I actually got into personal training and Pilates, and that led down my functional health train.
So how old were you when you stopped dancing, approximately?
23, about 23, 24, actually 24. So, and it was a hard stop and I never went back. My body was done. It's just, yeah, it was pretty bad. My last season, I was in a car accident right when I started with this company. And that's when things started getting worse with my health. And I just ignored it. And yeah, it was a good lesson. And I'm glad I did it. But I wasn't meant to dance forever. It was a fun thing. I always wanted to be on a national touring company. I did it. I checked it off my list. We're good. So.
Okay. Now you say things started getting worse with you. How so?
Yeah, I just started noticing more joint pain, more back pain. I was waking up with spasms in my back in the night. My hormones started getting really bad. Like I didn't have periods for years, actually. My hair was really thin. My gut was really off. My sleep was off. I just noticed like my body wasn't like, I was really tired all the time. I was like relying on multiple shots of caffeine a day. And yeah, you're just, when you're used to that, like I had lived like that for so long, I didn't realize how bad it was getting until fast forward many years. I look back and I'm like, oh my God, like I thought that was so normal to feel like that. And now I realize it's not. That's literally why I do what I do, is I'm like, it's not normal to feel this way, guys. So yeah.
You mentioned you danced with a tear in your back.
Yeah. Before college, I had a tear in my disc in my back, and along with like just a lot of other pain, but the pain didn't show up really on like a lot of imaging because autoimmune stuff tends to not show up really. Yeah, the tear in my disc, I was like, oh, this is not that good. And it was like 2.5 weeks before I left for college, where I had a scholarship for dance, and I was like, I'll just work through it. And I did. So don't suggest, but I wouldn't change a damn thing now still, because I know that I excelled in college and dance, and I just took a lot of anti-inflammatories.
Okay. And now, so you went to college for dance and science, you said. And when did you start getting involved in fitness and personal training?
College, I started getting into fitness. I started really getting into like weight training a little bit, probably a little earlier. I think it's so important my mom grew up really being into working out. So like I was always exposed to that. And that's one thing I'm really passionate about too when I work with a lot of moms, is like expose your kids to you working out. and you eating healthy, but not being over obsessive about it, because I think there's a fine line with especially women. Like if we see like a mom dieting all the time or see mom like constantly working out, that creates more negative patterns. But there's, I remember seeing her work out, and I would get to the gym and people started asking me like what I was doing because I was in like amazing shape. And then I just got really into fitness in college and then decided I wanted to get my personal training cert. And then my major was around health and fitness sciences, and I knew I wanted to train. And then I was going to go to med school, decided to back out of that, then was going to go to physical therapy school. And that's actually, I got Pilates certified. So I worked on like apparatuses to work with injured like athletes and dancers actually. Then I ended up saying, I'm not going to physical therapy school. I'm going to try this personal training thing and Pilates. And I like excelled in that for years, and then decided to open up my own company and go more into the functional health stuff later down the road. So yeah.
So when did bodybuilding come into play for you in terms of fitness?
Yeah. I was 27, I think. My now husband and I, we did long distance. He was in law school at the time, and I was working as a manager in a gym, and I had a lot more time, which was great because I was so busy. I was working there, and I was like, you know what? He was almost in the Marines, and I wanted to get in the best shape of my life. I was like, if you're going to go to basic training, I want to get in the best shape of my life too. And I decided, like, it's something I'd been thinking about for years. It's big on time and it's hard on your body. I was like, let's do it. So I hired a coach and I went all in. And, my first show, I won it. I won all 5 first places,
Congratulations.
nationally certified. And, I just went all out. And I think that was 2017. Or is it 2018? None of those years. And it was great until it wasn't. So.
Okay. And so post-show, how did you discover your autoimmune issues more so post-show, correct?
Yes. So this is dramatic. Like, it's dramatic. Because after my show, about 3 weeks later, I started rapidly putting on weight. I think I put on about 15 or 20 pounds in 5 weeks, maybe 6 weeks. But more than that, I started not being able to walk. My pain was so horrible in my hips and so flared up. I started not being able to get out of bed, started not being able to put bare weight on my legs. And it got so bad. I was on like 3 or 4 or 5 leaves a day just to walk into work. And I was a manager at a gym at this time. So I was embarrassed, right? Like, I was like, I have to be lifting weights for these clients. I have to be like helping out. So I started walking with a foam roller to like support my weight so people wouldn't ask questions. And then my client, who I loved working with geriatrics too, like giving them their life back, and his dead wife's cane is he gave it to me. He was like, hey, I see you're struggling. I know you don't want to buy a cane. Please just use this. That's what I still have to this day. And so I walked around with a cane for months. And just my flare-ups got so horrible during this time. Massive fatigue, massive body aches, massive brain fog. And I went to specialists for 2 years and nobody would diagnose me, even though I knew what it was because I had gotten the gene marker tested for this back when I was starting having the joint pain when I was 13. So I have ankylosing spondylitis is what I have. So when you don't take care of it, it can fuse your hips, it can fuse your spine. And my cousins had it. And we're debilitated from it, like in a wheelchair. So it does run in my family. So that was a lot of motivation to get my act together and try to understand this from a holistic standpoint, because medications were my only answer. And after finally getting diagnosed 3 years later, that's all the answers they had for me. So I went on them and they helped until they didn't.
What is that exactly?
Well, you mean ankylosing spondylitis?
Yes.
Yeah, it's an autoimmune disease that primarily attacks your spine and like your sacroiliac joints, which are like in your hips. And so ankylosing is fusion. Spondylitis is like of your spine. So like in its most progressed form, your spine fuses together. So you don't have any mobility in there. It's obviously very painful. So it can affect other joints as well. But that's like what primarily attacks. And so I realized when I was starting to have these pain in my hips and my back, that's kind of what was happening. But you typically sometimes don't get diagnosed unless there's progression of the disease, meaning like fusion. And they just thought, oh, you're active, right? You're super in shape, you're flexible. So people thought I was making things up. People thought I was, when I would go in with like immense pain, I was told to take an antidepressant, an anti-anxiety medication, go see a therapist. I was like, no, something's really wrong. Like something's pretty bad. But because nothing showed up on the labs, like my blood work was great, my MRIs were great. And, they finally diagnosed me off of a little bit of inflammation in my SI joint off of one MRI years later. It's hard because I was eating so healthy and I was taking really good care of myself, at least what I thought of. So like everything was showing up perfect and I was super healthy on the outside. So people don't take me seriously.
Wow. That's insane. They didn't believe, was it doctors that told you to take antidepressants?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
Yeah. This is why, like, when I work with clients, I'm such an advocate for them, because if somebody tells me I don't feel right and doctors are taking me seriously, I get it. And it's not a hit to the medical well, I have my own thoughts. But like, they have their time and place, right? They're often there to medicate. They're not there to work on your lifestyle, your gut health, or what's going on internally, right? Like when you look at an autoimmune issue, you need to address the root cause of why that autoimmune disease is happening in the first place. And typically it's going to come down to nervous system, right? Which I know you're big into. Nervous system work is just vastly huge. Like your body's in fight or flight constantly. It's not going to heal itself, right? Past trauma is a big one, right? That lives in our body. But what we work on a lot is gut work, because when your gut is out of balance, literally everything else is out of balance. Like you won't be able to absorb your nutrients, your immune system is compromised, and like mineral balancing. And those are like the biggest things that we see with autoimmune. And so once I addressed that, so I was on biologic drugs, which are immunosuppressants, and they did help. They were a godsend to me at the time because I was so horrible. I would have taken anything so I ended up in the ER one day after I literally couldn't put my socks and shoes on. I couldn't get out of bed. I finally told my husband, we got to go. We have to go to the ER. I need help. I need medication. And so we did. And I was fast tracked to a rheumatologist. And I said, I've been to 3 rheumatologists in the last year. I need you to take me seriously. This is what I have. It runs in my family. I need you to diagnose me. She said, okay, like that. And we started medication after like years. It was crazy. And I started bawling in like the rheumatology office. And she's like, well, oh my God, what's wrong? I was like, thank you for just like taking me seriously. Like, it's all I needed so I can get help. So yeah. So then I started biologics and they help. And then I realized when I started switching off of them to try to be on one that was better for pregnancy, because I knew down the road I wanted to get pregnant, it was a whole mess. Nothing worked. Insurance is a mess. You add in COVID vaccines, and my body just said, F you. And I was like, you know what? I need to work on this holistically. I'm done. Never went back, and I felt the best that I have. So yeah, it's a true testament to all the internal work that you can do instead of just feeling like you're tied to medication your whole life, which again is not a bad thing. Like sometimes people need to be on them and that's okay, but do the internal work too, right? Because I was feeling better, but I was still not feeling good on them, so.
So now when you say internal work, what are you meaning by internal work?
Gut health. I did functional lab testing. I had so much wrong with my gut. I'll never forget my functional doctor at the time. He goes, shit, he knew me. He was also my chiropractor. He was like, Shannon, I know you want to be the best at everything. Congratulations. This is the worst test we've ever seen. And I was like, well, always trying to be the best. And it was just horrific. So I worked on my gut health. I didn't work on mineral balancing quite as much because I didn't understand that until like what I know now. I could have expedited a lot of that process, but I worked on a lot of food, a lot of nervous system work, and tapering down workouts was a big one for me. Eating more was a big one for me. Supplements for short term were a big one. But big thing was just getting stress off of my body. You get stress off the body. Typically with like our clients who come in with this is eating more, working out less, going through gut protocol. And a lot of it is also just removing stressors in your life, like toxic people, toxic work environments, right? Things like that.
So you said it was 3 years before you got diagnosed?
If you want to talk about longer, it was actually 12 years. But like, because at 13, actually 15 years, 15. Yeah, because at 13 is when I started getting tested for this. How it can present sometimes is uveitis, which is inflammation of the eye. And at 13, I had an issue with my eye and I started having joint pain. And my mom knew it immediately to take me to a rheumatologist because her cousins or her uncles had literally been like on disability with it. So she knew what it was. I was positive for the gene marker for it, which doesn't mean you're going to get it, but it could escalate, right? So, but nobody like, and then I would keep going to rheumatologists and there's nothing they can do, right? It's kind of like when things get really bad, then they can medicate you, but they're not going to medicate you if it's not a problem, right? And so then when it actually started getting bad, then it was like 2 years straight of like 30 different specialists, everything under the sun before I actually got a diagnosis so I could start medication. Yeah.
That's just crazy to me because again, it's hard to like decipher it, but your mom pretty much knew. Like you had a strong reason to believe that. Even genetic reason, outside of your symptoms, on top of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's the problem with medicine sometimes is they, with autoimmune disease, sometimes it's 10 years before it shows up on labs but you can still be symptomatic. But it's like, it's not until it gets bad enough that they will then medicate you, right? And I get it, right? Like if somebody's coming in and they have pain, but nothing showing up on labs, like, okay, like I get them wanting to medicate, but it's also like, I don't want to be on medications. Like, it's not a pain medication. Like, what am I getting out of that? I remember asking one of the doctors, it's like, he thought I was just trying to pill push. And I was like, no, I don't want to be on any of this stuff. I don't want to be on any of it. I'm very natural, but at this point, natural doesn't work. I need the hearts, like, I need stuff that's going to work. So yeah, and that's what triggered me to be on that's when I knew I wasn't going to go to med school. And that's when I knew I wasn't going to go that path. I was like, I want to be on this proactive side of health before things get bad, before people have to go down this medication train or when the medication stops working. I want to heal people's bodies, not mask symptoms. Right. And again, they have time and place, but like most people, it's just masking symptoms. Why are you having the symptoms in the first place? Right. And it's like, also medication, it's very much like you're treating this with a medication, then you have a side effect, then you treat that side effect with this medication, and then you have maybe another thing you treat it with this medication. You're not looking at the body as a whole, right? And so if I go in and I was seeing an OBGYN, I was seeing an endocrinologist, I was seeing my PCP, I was seeing a rheumatologist, I was seeing a pain specialist. So they were all dealing with certain things when it's all connected. It literally is all connected. So that's why nobody, I was told to just go on birth control, go on anti-anxiety medications, go on biologic drugs, and keep taking NSAIDs. That was going to be my life forever. Until I interrupted that.
Now, what was your first step in that interruption?
The thing that changed everything for me was functional lab testing. And that's why I'm so passionate about it now, is because my chiropractor, God bless him, he saw my demise, for lack of better words. Like, he couldn't fix me. He tried, and it would make things worse. And just like my body was just a mess. And he was getting into functional lab testing at the time. And he was like, you should do the stool testing. I think it'll help. My stomach was like a hot mess express. Like, I couldn't keep anything in. It was just like chronic stomach pain, bloating, diarrhea, distension, heart, like everything. And I was like, no, it's fine. I'll get over it. I'll just fix my diet, which it was already at this point, I started getting like more sensitive to foods. And so at one point I was only eating like 5 or 6 foods a day. And that's when I was like, something's wrong. So I finally did it after he asked for like a year. I didn't want to invest in it. That's the thing. I was like, I didn't want to It was expensive. It's like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'll figure it out myself. I should know how to do this because I'm in the health profession, right? Spoiler alert, I didn't. And that changed everything when I realized just how bad it was. And when I got on the right kind of protocol, I'm talking like 6 weeks, probably 60% of my pain went away. I mean, that dramatic. I stopped walking with my cane. My stomach pain got exponentially better. And like, it wasn't even anything dramatic. It was just like, I just needed the right thing for my body and just do it. So I did. And like, that changed everything for me.
Wow. 60% better. That's a lot.
Uh-huh. And I mean, the other 40% was just, I need more time, but that's when I work with clients. Like, it's an investment, obviously, to do testing, to have coaching. But like, if I had just done it when I first knew, I would have saved years of my life, heartache, stress, damage to my body because I have irreversible damage. And also just like the heartache of trying to figure it out myself. Like, I get wanting to figure it out yourself. Like, I was there and I was in that profession too, which made me feel like an imposter. But it's like your life gets so much better when you can fix this. But it just takes the right kind of approach. You can't just think your way out of it. You can't just like eat clean and expect it to go away. Sometimes, like, it depends to the extent of what's going on. But like, customized approaches are just key to fixing it, right? Because I don't want anybody to struggle like I did, right? Especially so young, like if I didn't fix it, I don't know what would have happened to my life. I don't know that I could have gotten pregnant or sustained a pregnancy or been able to keep up with my kid. Like, that was a huge motivation for me, was I wanted a healthy pregnancy. Your gut microbiome gets passed on to your child. So I wanted to make sure that was good for me and my baby, my future baby. And that when I gave birth, I could actually pick him up and that I could play on the ground with him. And sure as hell, that's some badass motivation to get your stuff together. So, yeah.
No, I bet. No, so the functional lab testing, what would you say that helped you decide to do after getting the test done?
I just had a lot of infections. I had a lot of overgrowths in my gut. I had a lot of just severe compromised immune system. And so it really just came down to, I was doing a lot of like the food work already. So I swapped a few things out. So I was already pretty good with that. I just needed to add in specific supplementation. And for me, a lot of it was like, I wasn't killing the bad like pathogens and the bad infections. And that was why I kept getting even more sick. It's like, that doesn't go away with just like eating better. So once I was able to kill that off and also restore the gut lining a little bit more and like strengthen my immune system, strengthen the lining of my gut, that's when things got better. And it was like, I wasn't allergic to all these foods. I just kept becoming more sensitive to it because that immune system response was so heightened and my gut lining was so damaged. So what I thought was good was taking like an Everlywell, like food sensitivity test. It was a complete waste of money years ago because I thought it was a food sensitivity issue. It was not. It was a gut issue. It was an infection issue. It was a lining issue. It was a stress issue. So, yeah.
Okay. Now, how would you know the difference, whether it was a gut issue or it was like a food sensitivity issue?
Probably 90, maybe even 95% is not a food sensitivity issue. It's when your gut is compromised and when your immune system is compromised, you start becoming more reactive to certain things. So like, I'll use dairy as a big one because everyone wants to cut out dairy and gluten, although I'm not a fan of gluten. But it's like dairy, most people don't become necessarily more sensitive over the years. It's that the stress, the damage from environmental factors, from food, things like that, start damaging the gut lining. You become more sensitive to foods. So then once we go through a gut protocol, they're able to introduce dairy with no issue again. So it wasn't their issue, right? So, and at some point too, if you do a food sensitivity test, it's just going to show probably everything you just ate in the last 2 weeks. Like at least half of that's going to show up. And then you're going to start fearing food and you're going to start fearing that all these are the issue when they're not. Like you keep cutting out foods. You might feel a little better initially, but then nothing really changes. And then you want to introduce those foods again. I know for me, when I did that, I just like cut out everything. I was reactive to everything. I wasn't. It was just my body's just way of just rejecting everything. So what I say is people like, if they're still reactive to foods down the line, like if you go through a gut healing protocol, if you work on stress management, if you work on, reducing just overall toxic load on your body, and then we're still having some issues, like we might want to explore food sensitivities. Like there could be absolutely some stuff that's going on. But do you need to invest in that? Especially right off the bat? No. Definitely not.
Okay. No, I gotcha. Now, when would you think somebody should invest in functional lab testing?
That's a great question because it really just depends. The sooner you test and don't guess, the quicker you can get results. So do I think everybody needs to invest in it? I'll tell you, if you aren't doing the basics, like if you're not already eating decently clean, if you're not, moving your body, if you're not drinking water, work on that. If you're not sleeping, work on that stuff first. Because like literally, if we're going to invest hundreds of dollars into functional lab testing, it's always going to come down to probably the basics are always going to be, we need to eat better. We need to sleep. We need to reduce stress on the body. We need to move. Minimum, right? And so like do those basics first. Then if we're still having symptoms, then yes, I believe in lab testing. It's just like, I never want anybody to waste money. So I think you have to be mentally in a good place and your body in a good place before really doing that. But honestly, it's a game changer. If you're doing all of the basic work and you're like, my hormones are still a mess, my stomach's still bloated, I'm still having pain, my brain is kind of foggy, I'm losing hair, test, don't guess, because you're going to just expedite your process tenfold when we actually have a clear plan of what's going on internally instead of just trying to like chase symptoms,
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I like what you said, test, don't guess.
Yeah.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Kind of like better safe than sorry, just assuming that you don't have something.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing, it's not funny. The interesting thing is that sometimes, especially with like gut, is it doesn't show up normal. Like a lot of clients, I'll give an example. One of my favorite examples is I had a client I'd worked with very closely for years. So like I knew her lifestyle and our doctor kept increasing her SSRIs. And I was like, she's like, yeah, I just keep feeling more anxious and I don't know why. And I was like, okay, nothing changed. Like her diet was on point, her nutrition, like she was doing everything right. And I was like, something's not right. So I asked her to get labs, showed like a lot of inflammation. I was like, listen, we need to explore what's going on in the gut. She didn't have any traditional gut stuff like bloating, constipation, diarrhea, heartburn, nothing. And I was like, just trust me. Came back, rampant levels of what's called candida and yeast overgrowth and a lot of just bacteria imbalances. And it was just so interesting because gut issues don't always present. Sometimes like 90% of your serotonin is created in your gut. So when your gut's off, it's going to sometimes show up as anxiety, depression, panic attacks, things like that. A lot of like a big one we see a lot is also rashes, like skin rashes. So 8 weeks later, completely off her 90% off of her SSRIs. She was able to taper down. I didn't do that. Her doctor did, but she didn't need them. She was on a super low dose just because she was getting married and she wanted a little bit of help. And like, she's like, they just kept increasing it. I didn't even know what to do. And now I'm of them. Like that is the power of healing. And so, sometimes it's not as obvious, So most clients that come into us come in for weight loss in some regard. And then they realize everything else in their life gets better, right? It's like they come in thinking, oh, I'm just going to learn how to eat right and work out. And they do. But then their cycles get better. They don't have PMS anymore. Their skin clears up. Their bloating gets better. And the brain fog gets better. Their anxiety gets better. And it's like, wait, I didn't even realize that was a problem. And I realized how good I could feel because I'm just so used to feeling bad. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. Okay. So a lot of them come to you for weight loss.
Yeah. We take an interesting approach because, I am a women's health and fitness company. We do focus on weight loss. It's not the only thing we work on though, because I wanted to be the change in the industry where it wasn't just like you come in and I try to make you lose as much weight as possible. I've seen too many programs, too many bad trainers, and you wreck your hormones and your gut health in the process. And so you can't, we do teach things like macros and things like workouts. And I think those are great basics, but what happens after that? Like, you don't want to track macros the rest of your life, and like what happens when going a little bit off? So I wanted to address a little bit more holistically what was going on. So not, I'd probably say 80%, maybe 75% of our clients come in with weight loss. Not everybody does. Some people want to gain weight. Some people just want to be healthier. But the clients that do come in with weight loss, we stress the importance of like, this is more than just your nutrition, more than just macros. It's whole body healing. That way you can lose the weight and stop getting trapped in this diet cycle forever, because it's mentally a huge bear when you are just so focused on losing weight and what diet you're going to do next, right? So without addressing anything else that's going on.
That makes a lot of sense. So when somebody comes and works with you, what's your guys' like first step?
It depends on the client, really. We are a custom like health coaching company. And I take a lot of pride in that because some people come in and their first step is like, let's drink 100 ounces of water a day because you're like a dehydrated cucumber. And we need to just like work on basics, habits like sleeping, stress, cleaning up the diet a little bit. Some people who have been doing a lot of that, we go into more advanced protocols like a flush, where we work more like deeper on adrenals, thyroid, and liver. Some people do functional lab testing right off the bat. And so we're going into, a gut protocol or mineral balancing protocol. But most clients that come in, we're always working on like, we're getting a baseline for nutrition first. Like a lot of people think they're doing everything right? And then they come in and they're usually vastly under eating, actually. Some overeating. So we work on that. We work on opening up detox pathways and drainage support. We usually do some custom supplementation based off of their labs, based off their symptoms, to just kind of get them started. And we address stress management. We have like a nervous system course that we have clients kind of go through. So that's usually step one. And then step two is going to be, are we reverse dieting them? Are we putting them through a cut? Are we doing a gut protocol? It really just depends where they're at, right? Not only physically where they're at, but where they're at mentally, because so many people come in having done like, let's say macros and workouts, and it's very triggering for them to do that. So we take that all away. Some people want to understand macros and they want to understand that, and they want to, work on building muscle, and really like that's a big focus, right? So I don't believe that everybody has to be put in one box. We kind of meet clients like where they're at.
That's awesome, meeting them where they're at. I think that's the best way for any type of success, wherever somebody's at, meeting them there.
It has to, because if you're going to invest in it, like we want this to be something that you can do forever. Because I see too many programs that, people invest in, they put them in a box and maybe they see success, right? Maybe they drop weight, maybe their skin gets a little better, their gut gets a little better, but it's like it wasn't in tune with what felt good for them. They were just doing it to drop weight fast or to follow the protocol. But then what happens after that? If it didn't feel good for you, if you didn't actually understand how you're doing these protocols or why you're doing them, then you're not going to keep that weight off. You're not going to keep your gut in a good place, right? And so it's one thing to see results, it's another to keep them. So, that's what I feel is really important. One thing I'm passionate about is the education, that high, touch accountability, because I don't want this to be something that you get success and then reverse it back the second you stop, right?
That's so true. Even I think that's seen in a lot of, even bodybuilding, like you mentioned, you gained a lot of weight post competing. And I've never competed, but I know a lot of people who have, and I've seen that even if it's not 15 pounds, you see them gaining that weight back and almost reversing everything that they progressed, per se.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a way to do it healthy and not, because you should gain weight after a competition at some point. You need to, because you can't stay lean forever.
Yeah.
And you have to, I think this is one thing women just fail to understand more than possibly anything, is you have to go through periods of not dieting and eating at maintenance Like, you've maintained a weight loss, you understand. You've probably done that through periods of dieting, reversing, maintaining, right? You know, your metabolism has to be flexible, and it cannot be metabolically flexible if you're in a deficit. You know, if you're in a deficit forever, your thyroid, your hormones, everything starts down regulating forever. So yes, but you know, that there's a healthy way to do it. You know, my coach, you know, it was a big company, and I was one of hundreds of people, and I received a sheet that every other person got. I know that 100% because I had food issues. I had workout issues because of like pain and my stomach. So like, they kept forgetting it. They kept just giving me the plan they would give everybody else. And I was like, hey, I'm paying you to give me a customized thing, right? And then even reversing, they told me some basics on what to do. And in full transparency, a lot of it was my fault. I didn't follow it. I was like, oh my God, I'm starving. Give me all the donuts, you know? So, but it was hard because like, I didn't feel understood. And now I understand as I tap into intuition more. I just ignored my intuition. I was all logic brain, all like, just tell me what to do, give me a plan, I will follow it. No intuition. And then I just realized like it wasn't aligning with what I wanted, and like I wasn't getting what I needed. And now I understand, like as I tap into intuition, like I wouldn't ever do that again. So I don't know if that makes sense.
How were you ignoring your intuition?
I just did what people told me. And like, I remember reaching out to my coach saying, hey, this doesn't really feel that great. And she told me pretty much in this exact words, I've been doing this for a long time, so you should trust what I have to say and ignore how I was feeling. And so I did. And you know what, though? It got me my competition. I won it. Like, I get it. But I didn't even really know what intuition was until the last few years. Like, I know I've had it, but I've always just kind of pushed it down with logic and pushing through everything. And so that's been a journey the last really year and a half to like understanding intuition, trying to tap into it, trying to chill out.
You know, I love how you mentioned not staying in a fat loss phase forever and understanding. And I think a lot of women don't realize that you can't be in one for too long. And I, even myself, prior to working with the coach I work with now, when I first went to her, she was like, Amanda, you've been in a deficit for way too long. And it was about 6 months. And it was kind of lengthy, especially for what the deficit was, also with my activity level. So hindsight, but it's like, you know, I think a lot of people, especially women, don't realize that.
Yeah. It's because we're not taught that. We're taught to eat less. We're taught to work out more. But then they're surprised, like, well, I did this diet and it worked, but then I gained it all back and more. Yeah. Every time you diet, your metabolism downregulates. And, you know, when you just go back to eating normal, you're going to put that weight, you know, on quicker. And then it's going to be harder to lose that second time and harder to lose that third time. But that's one thing I really love to break from women. Like, one of my favorite cases is a client that came in like eating 1,200 calories. We have a lot of these cases, and I reversed her to 2,700 calories, and she dropped 30 pounds in the process. And her whole life changed because she just like been eating like a bird forever. And like, you know, obviously she felt like crap, and she just feared food all the time. And like her whole life got better, like weight loss aside. Like, she just started trusting her body more. Her body started trusting her. But it's not going to happen if you're eating nothing. And people are like, oh, well, I just, you know, I went on vacation and I ate a ton. So like, I've been eating in maintenance. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. Like, you know, typically I don't like seeing clients in a deficit for longer than 3 to 4 months, you know, and people come into us having deficit for like, you know, 15 years. So that's one of the hardest conversations I think to have with a client is like, hey, we've got to reverse you. We've got to eat more, and you might not lose weight in that process. And people are like, but I came to you for weight loss. I'm like, I understand. But your metabolism is giving me the big middle finger. So we can either drop you down in calories, which I'm unwilling to do as a smart coach, or we reverse out of this. You got to trust me. And it sucks because it's not a quick fix. You know, sometimes you got to get your body, your metabolism to, you know, when I talk about metabolic restoration, sneaky thing is it's not me giving you a new supplement that's going to burn fat faster. It's me giving you more food. So your body starts trusting you again and burning more calories later on, right? Like, so yeah, it's important. It's one of the most important things that you can do is just go through these cycles so you can lose weight. Like I always tell clients, you probably understand this. If you're in a 500 calorie deficit, you're not losing weight. Like we can keep doing this forever and ever until like your metabolism eventually shuts down. Like, or it can reverse you. You should be losing weight easy. You should be losing a pound a week if you're in a deficit, you know, a 500 calorie deficit. If you're not, let's take a look at that. Obviously, there's some other elements. We could be dealing with a hormone issue, you know, insulin resistance issues are so big right now, you know, inflammation, but there's a reason. So stop trying to diet your way. They're like, oh no, it's just because I have to do keto again. I was like, no, but it's not that actually. So yeah, definitely cycling, and it's called periodization of nutrition is imperative for long-term success, especially when like, you know, you can be in a deficit a little longer if you have more to lose. You know, if you have 100 pounds to lose, we could probably be in a deficit for longer. But after a while, if you're in a deficit and you're losing, I don't know if you experience this, a lot of those clients start experiencing hair loss, fatigue, maybe some like joint pain. You know, they just like things start going a little bit off because they're not having enough nutrients. But then it's difficult because you just lost a lot of weight and you think, if I reverse, I'm going to put it all back on and I'm going to go back to the person I was beforehand. Did you go through that too?
A little bit of that like feel mentality.
Yeah. And that's normal, right? You know, but sometimes it's like you drop 70 pounds and then you put on 5 during a reverse, you're okay. And then you can drop another 20 or 30 pounds, depending on how much you have to lose, right? You know, but you have to have that break. Your metabolism needs that break. If not, your thyroid really starts getting wonky, your hormones start getting wonky, your gut health starts getting wonky, all very scientific terms. And so, you know, having that break gives your body a chance to just like even if you're in a good calorie deficit and you're losing weight and you're feeling good, it's still a stressor on the body. It's still stress, right? Even the good stress is still stress, right? So.
Love that. Even good stress is still stress. That's so true. I'd love if we could transition a little bit. But before we started recording, you mentioned about how the mindset in the bodybuilding culture is often negative and not the best. I'd love if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
I think I had mentioned it to you. People look at bodybuilders or people that are really lean in the fitness industry and think you're super healthy, right? At my fittest, at my leanest, I was 100% the most unhealthy I've ever been. Not only physically, but mentally. And I think in the bodybuilding industry, you know, and I will say I wasn't huge into this culture. I was in and out of it quickly when I realized it wasn't aligned with myself. But so many of these women deal with body dysmorphia. So many women deal with eating disorders. And so many people don't know how it's all about food, macros, fine tuning, and not about general health, right? And it has to be to an extent. Like you can't, like if you're getting on stage, like you're not worried about literally anything else except for how is my body reacting and how am I looking, right? Versus how are you feeling? But so many women ignore that year after year and they're doing competition after competition until suddenly their body stops responding. This happens all the time. And then suddenly they stop losing weight. They put on weight rapidly. They start developing an autoimmune disease like puffiness, fatigue, like that happens. And this is also just athletes in general. Like it doesn't even have to be solely bodybuilding, but that happens all the time. And it's like overnight. And then it takes years to reverse, like to get your body to chill out from all the stress and trust you again. You know I've dealt with some bodybuilding clients. I mean, it's been 2-3 years before we can enter a deficit again, you know? And so people get mad when they can't ever enter a deficit after a 6-week maintenance period, even 6-month maintenance period. Sometimes your body needs time, right? After years and years of damage. So it's a really interesting culture. It's an interesting mindset. And it's hard when you've been lean and when you look lean. It's really difficult to suddenly go back to being a little bit fluffier, like, you know, and not seeing that same muscle definition. And even though that's what you need to do, that's healthy. Like, you know, when I was going through maintenance and cuts, like I would put on about 10 pounds, sometimes 15 to go into a bulk. Like that was what I needed to do. I was okay with that. But it's sometimes mentally, it's hard. You want to be lean. You want to see your abs. You want to see that striations, you know? But yeah, I think the last decade, we've seen a shift a little bit. Like competitors are focusing a little bit more on hormone optimization, on gut health, things like that. But it's still not quite there. I think the reason we're seeing it is because we've seen so metabolically damaged people for so long. People are catching on like, hey, this can't happen to me if I don't take care of myself now.
It's so true. I love how you mentioned when you were at your fittest and your leanest, you like were at the worst mentally. I myself was in the same way. Like when I was even lesser than the 70-pound loss, like when I was at my absolute lowest, I felt awful internally. And the things I was doing to be able to be at such a low weight was insane. The excessive training, the excessive macro tracking, which, and nothing against macros, but I was obsessive. And it was to the point where even mindset wise, it wasn't right. It wasn't a good mentality place to be.
Yep. And I think that's where also I think a great like coach comes in. I know for some of our clients, when they're like in a deficit, they've seen a lot of progress, maybe they've dropped a lot of weight, I will sometimes be like, we are done macro tracking for a bit. And it's hard. They're like, no, but that's how I got here. I was like, I understand, but we need to break up with that a little bit. So we learn how to trust our body again, how to eat maybe a little more intuitively, how to like, get out of this so you don't have to feel trapped in macros forever. And it's scary. I remember when I was obsessively tracking everything and also eating only like chicken, tilapia, and rice and broccoli. But, it was really difficult to stop doing that because I thought I would just gain all the weight back and like lose all of my progress. Right. And, it's definitely not the case, but, they have their time and place. I think understanding macros is a game changer for people because for a lot of it, it's like, I understand I can eat more. And this is actually, there's not that many calories in this. A big one is fiber, right? It's that you're eating like no grams of fiber or no protein. Like I think it's really helpful to understand how we're eating and what goes into how many calories versus just calorie tracking, right? And eating if it fits my macros and, and realizing why we're still hungry and tired because our blood sugar is imbalanced and our food is filled with additives that are just low calorie. So yeah, but it's hard to break up with it when you've seen progress and it's worked in the past. You're like, why change, right?
Yeah. So what do you suggest if anybody's facing that? Why change? How to embrace that?
I think a lot of it is figuring out where you want to go. Like once you lose the weight, there's always like a what's next. And I think that's what like people struggle with is, okay, like people think they're going to be happier if they drop 20 pounds and suddenly their life's going to be forever different. Maybe. But how many of people lose 20, 40, 50 pounds and their life is the same, if not worse? Like people, they think they're going to be happy. But anyways, it's like, what's next? Let's say you drop the weight. Are you going to just keep tracking macros forever? Do you want to? Do we want to, like, what's the next step? Do we want to get stronger? Do we want to live a little bit more like free? I like tracking macros in a deficit and in a reverse. And then when in maintenance, that's a great time to take like the gas off the pedal. Usually I see the most success with people trusting that a little bit more. But I think just figuring out like why we're tracking it and what the next step is. But I think a lot of it comes down to trusting and also just like having another person to lean on and to watch and make sure everything's okay and kind of guide you in that process, I think is really, really imperative.
Now, I'm curious if you have any suggestions, anybody listening that's in the bodybuilding culture and has this mindset that we've been talking about, how they can shift it.
Can you repeat the question?
Anybody in the bodybuilding community that has this mindset, how they can shift that mindset.
Well, I don't think it's exclusive to people in the bodybuilding industry. Bodybuilding is like the extreme form of, but there's way too many women that are in this over-exercising, under-eating life without going to like those extremes. I think it's taking a really hard look at how you're actually feeling and sitting with that a little bit. Are you really feeling your best doing this right now? Or are you ignoring some of your like body's warning flags? You know what I mean? Because if you think you're feeling fantastic, why are you going to change? There's no reason to change. Do you know what I mean? Like I can tell you all day long, if you do this for too long, you're going to feel bad on the other side, but you're not going to believe me. So I know, because I didn't believe myself either. So I think shifting your mindset unfortunately sometimes comes down to when things, I hate to say this, but when things start going wrong and then you're forced to do it, right? So I think before that happens, it's just like being honest with you. How do you feel? Do you want to be doing this forever? Why are we doing this? What's the next step? How do I see myself living in the next 5 years? Do you see yourself doing exactly what you're doing right now in the next 5 years? No, then let's change it. And I think also just recognizing that if you shift and you change, it's not a forever thing, right? Like if you, we'll just talk macros. If you're tracking macros and let's say we want to take a break, it doesn't mean you can't go back to tracking macros, you know? If you never track macros and you have a bad relationship with it, it doesn't mean that you can't heal that relationship and understand a little bit more. There's going to be phases in your life. And there's going to be things that you need to work on or not, and it's not forever. So I think that's probably one of the big things. You can always change. We can always shift. I think it's healthy to try different things and to also just like, I think as females, we turn off intuition a lot too. And I think when we get overly obsessive about numbers and stuff, that turns it off. So I believe taking some time off too and just tapping into what feels good on my body, doing stuff because you enjoy it, not because it's going to give you X, Y, and Z outcome is also really, I think, a really important phase to be in. But again, that phase might come at different times. It might be after you go through a weight loss period. It might be that your body's not losing weight because it doesn't feel safe and it doesn't enjoy what you're doing. And then we just have to tap into that then, right? Then once your body feels good and safe, we can enter that fat loss phase, right? So, comes at different times.
Thank you. I love everything you mentioned there. How do I feel? Why am I doing it? Do I want to do it forever? And I love how you mentioned about change and like it doesn't have to be a forever thing just because you're doing something now. Like you can always resort back to something else if you try this. I had a guest at one point who left her corporate job to pursue her business, and her partner was like, what if, and had all these what ifs. And she was like, it's not saying I can't go back and get, even if it's not this job, get another corporate job, and it's like so many people don't want to take this leap into whatever this new thing is, but it's not like you're stuck and you can't shift backwards because it's not even backwards. It's just shifting again, another change.
100%. I in my world, especially with, let's say we're dealing with a hormone or gut protocol. So it's like, spend the next 2 to 3 months doing something different. Like do something different and then change your freaking life. Because if you dedicate time to that, whether it's your business, whether it's your health, spend those 3 months and do something different. And then did it work? Maybe it's a no. Okay, then let's shift and let's try something different, but don't freaking give up. And I think so often I deal with a lot of clients that just aren't willing to do sometimes the hard thing for a few weeks, for a few months to change the entire rest of their life, And even like what you mentioned with the other guests, it's like, yeah, just sometimes you got to take the leap of faith. And, I always say like leap and build your parachute on the way down sometimes. But yeah, sometimes you have to do the hard things. Sometimes you really have to like focus on certain things for a few weeks at a time to change like the course of your entire freaking life.
I love that. Build your parachute on the way down. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this has been a good talk.
Yeah, thank you. Have you heard of a man named Jay Shetty?
Probably. See, in the functional world.
So he's got a podcast called On Purpose, motivational speaker. He's an author.
I think so.
So he ends his podcast with 2 segments, and I end mine with the same.
Oh, nice.
The first segment is the many sides to us, and there's 5 questions, and they need to be answered in 1 word each. What is 1 word someone who was meeting you for the first time would use to describe you as?
Kind.
What is 1 word someone who knows you extremely well would use to describe you as?
Achiever.
What is 1 word you'd use to describe yourself?
1 word I would use to describe myself? Passion.
What is one word that if someone didn't like you or agree with your mindset would use to describe you as?
Probably passionate.
What is one word you're trying to embody right now?
Ease.
Okay. The second segment is the final 5, and there's 5 questions, and they can be answered in up to a sentence. What is the best advice you've heard or received?
Recently, it's been not making stories about something mean something more than what they are.
Why is that the best advice?
Because I think people create stories about what's happening and make it mean something about themselves, so make it mean something about who they are, and rather than like just seeing it for what it is and realizing that it's not necessarily about you, it's about their projections or, you know, how they're feeling. So
That's true. What is the worst advice you've heard or received?
recently, it's been a lot of just grind harder now, ignore everything else, and just like grind so that you can see success. You know, I've been really trying to rewire a lot of that the last few years, tap into a little bit more of my feminine and realize that a lot of that masculine energy of just like keep going, grinding is like driving a lot of us into the ground.
Yeah.
So.
What is something that you used to value that you no longer value?
Grind culture.
If you could describe what you would want your legacy to be as if someone were reading it, what would you want it to say?
That she's changed a lot of lives for the better, and she cared for people, and she's changed the course of women's wellness for good.
If you could create one law in the world that everyone had to follow, what would it be? And I want to know why.
A law? Oh, Lord. I'm gonna use this for my industry. That while seeing a normal doctor, that every insurance also pays for a functional doctor or a nutritionist or somebody alongside, so that women, particularly, but also men, are more holistically taken care of.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me. And where can everybody connect with you if they want to get in touch?
My Instagram is shannon.salge, S-A-L-G-E. I have a really great Facebook community. It's like the Women's Holistic Health and Fitness community. So you can find me over there. Shannon Selge is on Facebook. Those are probably the 2 best places to find me.
Okay, and I will link that in the show notes. And thank you so much for speaking with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Mandy's Mindset. Hey guys, Mandy's here with a few key takeaways from my informative conversation with Shannon. Now, let's keep it simple. First, you've got to get the basics right before diving into anything deeper, making sure you're eating clean, prioritizing your sleep, managing your stress, prioritizing moving your body. You need to make sure your nervous system is regulated before you dive into the deeper, more complicated things. Once you have the basics down, it's time to test things out and see what's working for you, what's not working for you. And that's where you can start to see real progress. Results are great, but keeping them is key. Anybody can get fit, but can you stay fit? It's one thing to get results. It's a whole different game to keep them. And now, no one can stay in a calorie deficit forever. You need periods of eating and maintenance and keeping things balanced and sustainable, because you can't be in a deficit or dieting forever. Next, it's important to know when to track macros and when not to track macros. If you're in a deficit or you're reversing, it's a great idea to track to stay on course. But when you're in a maintenance phase, that's a great time to stop tracking and allow yourself the ease or the flexibility of taking your foot off the gas and being a little less strict. Next, it's about feeling good and not only looking good, depending on what your goals are. If you are in the process of prepping for a bodybuilding competition, looks are something you're focusing on. I'm just going to be real with you. Bodybuilding is all about looks. But when it comes to your own health, it's just as important to feel good. Pay attention to how you're actually feeling, not just how things look in the mirror. You know, I talk about foods a lot and paying attention to how it feels in your body and feels for you. You know, just because something might be quote unquote healthy, I'm using air quotes if you're listening to me, doesn't mean it's good for your body. Everyone's body's different. Maybe your body's rejecting this, or it's not having a good positive effect to it. Pay attention to your individual body, not simply how things look in the mirror. How do you feel? How does this food make you feel? How does this exercise make you feel? How does whatever it is you're doing make you feel? And paying attention to that, because our bodies will give us cues if we listen. A big thing that Shannon and I talked about that I loved was staying connected to your why and checking in with yourself. Why am I doing this? Why am I tracking macros? How does it make me feel? Could I see myself doing this long term? Staying connected to your why keeps you grounded in what matters to you. And it helps you live a more intentional life. And lastly, nothing is set in stone. Don't be afraid to switch things up and tap into what feels right. If something that worked for so long for you is no longer working anymore, try something different. Do things you enjoy and not just what helps you hit a goal. Remember, the whole journey of life is about balance and making it work for you. You know, I talk about all the time how just because something worked for me doesn't mean it will work for you, or vice versa. Everybody is different. When I first started my weight loss journey and losing weight, everybody wanted to know, how'd you do it? How can I do it? What did you do? What I did might not work for you. It might, and I could share my story to potentially help you, inspire you, motivate you, but it might not. So trying different things and seeing what works. A lot of people have this nerve or this anxiety about stepping into something new, but you can always step out of it. You're not stuck. If it doesn't work, if you don't like it, try something new. That's it, guys. I hope this helps you stay focused on what truly matters. Keep it simple, keep it sustainable, and keep it true to you, because that's all that matters. What matters to you is most important. And remember, it's about progress. You're in this for the long game, so stay flexible, stay focused, and keep showing up for yourself. Because if you don't show up for you, who's going to show up for you? I hope this helps keep you centered, and I hope this helps shift the way you look at how you are showing up and prioritizing your health. Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Manda's Mindset. In case no one told you today, I'm proud of you. I'm rooting for you. And you got this. As always, if you enjoyed the show, I would really appreciate it if you would leave me a 5-star rating, leave a review, and share it with anyone you think would benefit from this. And don't forget, you are only one mindset shift away from shifting your life. Thanks, guys. Until next time.